Right, we got a new thing today in New York City for diners in restaurants here. You will see warnings on menu items in some establishments, chain establishments basically, warnings about sodium, salt. It's the first regulation of its kind in the nation, and the city estimates that 10% of items on these chain menus will need this warning. So is this an effective way of improving nutrition, and could more things be coming next? More warnings. John Bonshoff is a professor at George Washington Law School. He's all in favor of the measure, and Jeff Stier is senior fellow at the National Center for Public Policy Research. He opposes the new requirements. Gentlemen, I don't think it's going to take much to kindle this discussion. Jeff, let me start with you. You argue, and tell me why, that these kinds of warnings, what is the evidence here, these kinds of warnings, whether it's calorie counts or salt, don't have the effect that policymakers intend?
Well, look, the policymakers who want more warning labels, calorie counts on menus, all have good intentions. The question is science driving the policy? And just yesterday, the New York Times, of all sources, said that the menu calorie counts, which started in New York and then went national, aren't working. They're not having the desired effect. And what we're doing is
Meaning what? Meaning that people are still eating high-calorie foods, or there's no decrease in calorie, there's no connection?
Yeah, actually, they've looked at people who, and this was lots of different studies, and the New York Times yesterday reported on this in detail, is that when you have these calorie counts on menus, and there was an example in New York City where they studied young people in the inner city of New York City, and then they studied young people in the inner city of Newark. New York City had the requirement. Newark, New Jersey didn't. And they actually found, maybe counterintuitively, that the kids in New York, where they saw the calorie counts on the menu, actually ate more calories. They thought maybe they were getting a bigger caloric bang for the buck. So what we're learning is from the science, if I can just say from the science, we're learning that this is not a good way. Back with the calorie counts, they said, oh, it's not intrusive. We're not taking away your food. It's just more information. You know,
all right, but there are many other studies.
So John, is more information good, or should we be like reducing salt, mandating there should be a reduction of salt? Is it even going far enough in your mind?
No, it doesn't go far enough. I've litigated on behalf of this issue successfully. He cites one study. There are many other studies which go the other way. But the very best example is trans fat. When they required the labeling of trans fat almost disappeared from labels. We almost didn't have to ban it. Besides, in a free market system, people are entitled to know what they're getting. That's how the free market system works. They can't exercise free choice if they don't know what's in there, and if they don't know that some of the menu items have 150% in that one item of what you should safely eat in one day. That's unfair. People deserve to know that, and the studies do show, whether it's tar, nicotine, or anything else, that it does go down. And if you talk over me, I will not be able to answer your questions.
Jeff says, I'm going to let you answer the question. Jeff says that the warning labels don't change behavior. What's your evidence that they do?
There are many studies that show that it do, and the major one is when the federal government required simple disclosure of trans fats dramatically were reduced in most foods, so that when we got around to banning it, they were almost non-existent. We've seen the same thing with regard to warnings and tar nicotine disclosure with regard to cigarettes. And by the way, it's already on virtually every product you buy in the food store, including salt. Are you going to suggest we should get rid of this, Jeff?
Jeff?
I'm glad you have John Bonshoff on. Ban is his middle name. He's in favor of banning things across the board, from trans fats to salt.
Yeah, but that's an ad hominem argument. Why don't you stay on the issue?
Sure.
Stay on the issue. We're not banning anything. We're disclosing.
Okay, let Jeff respond for a second.
Right. In this case, no, you're not banning, and that's a good thing. I know you want to go further. But the answer is not always banning things. The answer is not always more warning labels. You could talk about how you were successful in suing about trans fats and salt and tobacco. The question is, were you successful in improving consumer health?
Hell yes, and if you ever have the guts to come into court and face me, or I can get you under cross-examination, your arguments will fall apart, sir. You can make them on TV, you can't make them in court.
John, the problem is that your side doesn't make them in the scientific world.
Yes, but we win in the courts and the legislature.
Let's let Jeff finish his thought.
And Jeff, I'm a scientist and you're not.
Okay, Jeff, just finish your thought.
Ad hominem. But let me just say, if you look at the New York Times article from just yesterday, it talks about this idea. It's not from a conservative think tank like me. It's not from the industry like John likes to bash. If you look at the science, these approaches don't work, and they have the effect of crowding out better ideas. It makes us feel like we're doing something good by putting more warnings on, but we're not. We need to come up with more innovative approaches about improving nutrition, improving the way people eat. And what we're learning is that more taxes on soda, warning labels on salt, and banning food ingredients doesn't help change how people eat.
We've gotten sugary soft drinks out of schools. We have raised the taxes on cigarettes, and New York City has one of the lowest rates of smoking as a result. And the ban on trans fats grew out of a disclosure. You're citing one article which will not stand up in court, will not stand up to cross-examination.
Gentlemen, let me interrupt. I want to get two questions in for you, John. The first question is this. Why would this only apply to chain restaurants? If it's good policy for Chili's or for Chipotle, why isn't it good policy for Le Bernardin or another fancy Per Se, for example, just to name a couple of the shishi restaurants in town?
Sure. The answer is that you start small where the burden is the least. And by the way, the ones you mentioned, Chipotle's and Applebee's, have already, as a result of this rule, lowered the fat content. So, Jeff, it is in fact working, behavior. And there are many examples of where it works. And if you continue to interrupt, you won't learn them. If I get you into court, we'll put you under cross-examination, and all of this blah, blah, blah about other approaches just will fall apart. That's why we win in the courts. That's why we win in the legislature.
Jeff, I have a question. And it's nothing to do with, the science or whether or not we have a right to have more information and that kind of thing. It's just basically, should the government be telling us what to do? At the end of the day, isn't this just a greater nanny state?
Yeah,
no, that's the whole idea of free market. Under free market, people make their own decisions, but they have to have fair and accurate information. Coca-Cola tells me, for example, that there's low sodium in my can. It doesn't tell me how much, which indicates that people are interested in this, but they cannot make a decision without that information. That's why disclosure is important.
John, thanks for answering questions.
Jeff, the last word is yours.
Directed at me. Yeah, well, I think the last word is that science should drive public policy. And in this case, John's wrong. These warning labels do not do any good, and we ought to look for more innovative, free market ways of doing it. New York City is a great example of how we're doing it the wrong way. They've banned e-cigarettes.
It worked in so many other areas, Jeff.
We have to leave it there.
It really worked.
Thank you guys very much. I knew it wouldn't take much to get them going, and it sure didn't. John of George Washington University Law School, and Jeff of the National Center for Public Policy. We'll be right back.